Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel, and in today's video I'm going to use Johnny Depp as a case study to illustrate the following 3 points. So firstly, I want to show why I think Johnny Depp is an INFJ and not an INFP, which he's popularly typed as. 2, I want to show why I feel typing natural speech is a very good way into figuring out the workings of the mind. And 3, I think defining the personality types based on the 4 underlying cognitive functions makes it more insightful and more interesting than general MBTI Myers-Briggs descriptions. It's widely accepted that Johnny Depp is an INFP in the MBTI Myers-Briggs community based on general descriptions of what I call macro behaviors. So his general demeanor, his interests, hobbies, his career choices, etc. Popular MBTI system defines the 16 types based on these general personality and macro behavioral traits. And I think that this method can be too generalized in uncovering the nuances to how a person thinks, which is why I think so many of us, when we read the MBTI descriptions, we find ourselves resonating possibly with more than one type. So then does that make us more than one personality type? And then the other thing that happens is that over time we resonate with different personality types. So I get the question, does our personality type change? Whereas I feel the more nuanced system would be to define each of the personality types by the 4 underlying cognitive functions that govern how we perceive the world, how we get information from the world, and also then how we process that information and make decisions from. So in a nutshell, I feel that the popular MBTI Myers-Briggs system only looks at the resulting behavior and decisions that a person makes, whereas the cognitive functions actually dives deeper into the thought process of how they got to those decisions and behaviors. It also doesn't pigeonhole a type into certain generalized life choices. In the case of Johnny Depp, you can see in this diagram the 2 types that he is most often typed as, more popularly the INFP, but also the INFJ. And based on MBTI Myers-Briggs, the 4-letter system, they are seemingly very similar types on the surface. They're both introverted, both intuitive dominant types, both feeling types. However, you can see they actually have completely different underlying functions, which means that the way they think is very different, and that's what makes it interesting. So I'm going to demonstrate how I type Johnny Depp by analyzing his natural speech in unscripted interviews. These are situations where he's unlikely to consciously control what comes out of his mouth in terms of the choice of words. He's just talking naturally in the moment. And I find that natural speech gives us direct access to our thoughts. And how Johnny Depp approaches answering a specific question would provide clues as to his underlying thought processes, which can then be defined by these cognitive functions. So to differentiate whether Johnny Depp is an INFJ or an INFP, we can look back at this diagram here with the cognitive functions and try to identify which cognitive function he displays in his natural speech when answering impromptu questions. So an easy one to start with, whether he has introverted feeling, FI, so an INFP, or whether he has extroverted feeling, FE, as in an INFJ. They are both feeling functions, so it would be a response that is reflecting values. However, with an INFJ who has FE, this would be a collective value, a value that was sourced externally, whereas in an INFP, these values would be from an intrinsic source, would be from a subjective place within Johnny Depp, which is the definition of FI, introverted feeling. So I will play this clip and pay attention to any values that he describes and whether you think that these are intrinsically sourced values, so his own values, or he's describing values of a collective, of the wider society, or a group external to himself.
How were you pitched Pirates of the Caribbean? How did you first learn about it? How was the character described to you initially? And what was your response?
It probably lasted about 37 seconds because I had actually poor Tracy, again, my agent. Tracy and I had a meeting with some of the upper echelon at Disney, and because there was a film that they'd offered me, and I didn't think it was right for me, but what I was interested in, because I just had kids, you know, or actually, I just had a daughter then. She was like 3.5 years old, and I've been watching nothing but cartoons, like, you know. And that's it, like, that's really it. There was no YouTube, there was no, you know, it's like, you're in France, you're raising a kid, and break out the Tex Avery, you know? And so, yeah, I mean, I just watched cartoons for 3 years, and that really had a strong effect on me, because I kept thinking, like, you know, watching Bugs Bunny or Wile E. Coyote or Pepe Le Pew or any of these people, why can they get away with this stuff? And we buy it, all of us, like from 5 years old to 85 years old. We accept it. Not only do we accept it, we take it in as fact, because we want to see the next scene, where it's absolutely fine when Wile E. Coyote walks in with like a Band-Aid on his head after a 3,000-pound rock. That is what Ed Wood meant by the suspension of disbelief. But so for me, the question was how can one take a live action performance and put it within the parameters of, say, one of those cartoons? How much can I get away with? How much, and how can you find a way to, what is the character?
So just to summarize, the question was how the Pirates of the Caribbean film was pitched to him originally by Disney and what his response was. And in summary, his response was that whilst he was taking care of his little girl, he ended up watching a lot of Looney Tunes. And it started making him think, this cartoon, there's no realism to it. It's so unbelievable what these cartoon characters go through and survive, and yet we accept it as fact. We expect the cartoon characters to survive, impossible circumstances and injuries, and we actually find it funny as well. He's thinking, then how can he take the idea of the suspension of disbelief and put it into a live action performance, transfer that from cartoon to live action, and create the character of Captain Jack Sparrow? So if I had to dissect that speech, he's basically condensed the instance of watching the Looney Tunes, that he's noticed that as a collective, as a society, that we buy into the suspension of disbelief. We buy into these ridiculous, funny cartoon characters. And that is a value. And what kind of value is it? He's describing it as a collective value of our society. And that to me is extroverted feeling. FE. Even the way he talks about it, he uses the pronoun we. He doesn't reflect that he himself finds it funny. He doesn't talk from that point of view. He says, he thinks, why do we accept it as fact? Why do we keep watching it? So the way he sees it is as a collective. He is part of this bigger group, which again tells me he has extroverted feeling, FE, as a function. And then on top of that, he then takes that collective value and then he thinks, how can I take this idea, this value, and transfer it to live action performance? That is what extroverted feeling, FE, does. It takes on something from the external, in this case a value. It finds ways to apply this value, to mobilize this value. He's also responding to this value that he notices in all of us and thinks about, how could I put this into action? How could I take this value and entertain even more people and entertain people in different ways? And that is the essence of what FE, extroverted feeling, does. So this is why I think he has extroverted feeling and therefore an INFJ rather than an INFP. And as an added point, beyond identifying what feeling function he has, I also noticed how he chose to respond to this question. So if you rewind, the original question was actually, how did Disney pitch it to you? How did they describe the original character? And then how did he respond? And if you notice carefully, Johnny Depp doesn't actually answer the first two questions. He only answered the third question, which is how he responded. All he said to the first two questions was that the whole Disney pitch only lasted, jokingly 37 seconds, and that he didn't feel the character was appropriate. And to me, that tells me that he's a person that sees the outcome or the end goal as more of a priority rather than the process, the kind of trail in between of how he got there. And so it is reflected in his natural speech that he jumps to the ending. This is revealing of someone with the function introverted intuition, NI. Therefore, more evidence that I feel he is an INFJ rather than an INFP.
Now, you did your share of appearing, or you were featured on magazines like Tiger Beat and that type of thing. Did you ever enjoy any of that period, or did you want to distance yourself from that as soon as possible?
The minute that started happening, because the minute that started happening, I was scared to death because I thought, oh my God, it started like, I see the death coming, I can see it coming. I could smell it. And I smell it now. I was, because I never, I didn't ever do any interviews with those things. It's a strange thing. What they do is they somehow buy portions of interviews that you've done for like newspapers or other magazines and print it and rewrite it, so it becomes like this weird little fictional story, So, yeah, I was scared to death, so I tried to fight it.
So in this clip, the original question was basically how he felt about appearing in many teen idol magazines or being a teen idol. And his immediate response was quite a good illustration of what NI, introverted intuition, sounds like. Basically, he said that he was very scared when that started happening, when he started appearing on these teen magazines, because he saw the end. He could smell his death. And he kind of left it at that, this kind of vision, almost like a prophecy. And this is the mysterious nature of introverted intuition, which I argue is why we find Johnny Depp having this mysterious quality, because I think that's a dominant function of his. So even in his speech, he leads with describing these poorly explained visions that he has of what the end goal or the end outcome is without really any real context to it. So what I mean by that is it's a very intangible idea that he's describing. He could mean his literal death. It could be the death of his career, the end of his career, or it could even mean the death of his identity, the end of knowing who he is. And he only backs that up later on with more context, which I argue is the function introverted thinking TI. He adds more context as to the process of how he got on those magazines, that they were not real interviews and therefore not a real representation of him. And he obviously is very against that. But again, he doesn't articulate that like someone with introverted feeling FI, which isn't an INFP. The way he articulates it is that he gives you a lot of context as to, how wrong the situation is without ever actually saying himself, this is wrong. He never verbally directly concludes that thought, that value, that feeling of his. He relies on the audience to infer that. And again, that makes me think that he's not introverted feeling, not FI. In fact, he's more TI and FE, which makes him more INFJ. This clip is actually quite a good example to illustrate my problem with general behavioral traits or personality traits to type people, because often Johnny Depp is labeled as an INFP or having introverted feeling FI because he is a very authentic person. He said in different interviews that he doesn't want to become a product. And here he's showing his huge discomfort of being portrayed in an inauthentic way. And that's the problem. Being authentic can be a trait that any type has. It depends on what your definition of authenticity is. When I talk about FI being authentic, it means that they derive their values from within themselves, and they would prefer to make decisions that align with those things and therefore being true to themselves. But if we describe being authentic as a more general personality trait, then it's anyone who is true to themselves. And therefore, if you're true to your type, you're true to the cognitive functions you have, then technically you are authentic. And therefore, anyone could be authentic if it's by that definition. It doesn't mean they have introverted feeling. It doesn't mean they are FI. It doesn't mean they are INFP or ISFP types that have FI. And so this is why typing with cognitive functions and typing via natural speech, I feel, is much more nuanced and accurate. And as a bonus for the real geeks out there, I'll include a clip of someone with FI, with introverted feeling, and watch how she talks about values.
What do you most hope that children take away with them from the experience of reading Harry?
What I would most like to think they take away is what I take away from my favourite books, which is the knowledge that there's always somewhere you can go that you love and where you're safe. And that's how I feel about my favourite books, that wherever I am, if I've got that book with me, I have got a place I can go and be happy.
Notice the nuance in how she describes a value. She describes it from a subjective place. It's from her. I would want children everywhere who's read my books to take away what I would like to take away. she's reflecting her own intrinsic values, what she would want, and therefore hope that everyone else would take on that value as well. Whereas with Johnny Depp, when he talks about values, it's from a collective place. You feel that he's talking for a group. So thank you for watching. I hope you found that interesting, helpful, geeky. If you did, then please like and subscribe to my channel. And if you wanted to book a session with me to talk and analyze your personality type, then please find booking details in the description box below.